And we have Dave from Mozilla. He's going to talk about how they use Selenium at Mozilla.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, so as Simon says, I'm Dave Hunt. I work for Mozilla. I work in the automation tools team, also known as the A team. This is our cool new logo there. And basically what we do in the A team is we develop automation tools for various departments, QA and development, to use to automate tests of their product. And that could be Firefox, Thunderbird, and also several web products. So it might be surprising to know that Mozilla has in a range of about 13 websites with test automation and more sites which don't have any automation at this point. This includes our support website, the add-ons website, add-on builder. We have crash stats sites, and Mozilla.org itself. And each of these have multiple tests running with multiple browsers and multiple operating system versions. So originally, we, like a lot of people, started with Selenium IDE, but it soon became obvious there were a lot of limitations to that. Primarily, tests only run back in Firefox. You can't test multiple operating systems. Multiple browsers. It doesn't have good flow control, and loop logic, and so basically we fairly quickly. Another issue that is maintainability. All of the tests are stored as HTML files on your disk. If you wanted to modify something, if a locator changed on a page or something like that, you have to modify a lot of files. So we migrated from that to Selenium Remote Control, and we used the Python client bindings for that. This was originally because a lot of the sites that we were developing were developed using Python, but we've kind of stuck with Python since then, just simply because it's a nice, from our perspective, it's a nice, elegant way of writing your tests, making sure they're readable, or as readable as they can be when they're code, essentially. We introduced the page object model and iterated over that several times, and we've now sort of got to a pretty good implementation that we're happy with. And then we got to the point where we needed to be able to run multiple operating systems, multiple browsers, and running parallel. So we introduced Selenium Grid into our infrastructure. So several things that we sort of learned along the way, and as we did, we added them to a style guide, which can be, there's a link here, a bit.ly link here, but I can share my slides afterwards if you're interested. That basically goes to our wiki page where our style guide is served. There's just an example of it there. In this particular example, in our page objects methods, we don't like them to contain any logic. So this particular example here is the first one. The good one is if we want to click login, we're just going to click the login button. We're not going to first check, see whether or not the user's logged in, and only click the login button if you're not logged in. Because if you're trying to click login and you're already logged in, that's a failure, and we want to identify those kind of failures. So there's various other things in our style guide, and some of them are code level style, some of them are more kind of best practices. Something else that would be a top tip from my perspective is be verbose in your test method names and your page object method names. There's no real limit on how verbose you can be, and it does make them more readable, more understandable. The amount of times I've seen abbreviations in these methods that actually make them completely ambiguous and not make any sense, it makes it very difficult from someone that is completely new to the test. At Mozilla, we're not just the employees, we're also a community. We have contributors just coming along with their spare time and helping us to write and run our tests. So it's really, really important for us that the tests are readable and maintainable from that perspective. So originally we had code within every one of our test projects. So as I said, 13 or so websites. Each one of them had test repository, and every one of those were starting up the Selenium browser, running the tests and then shutting it down. So there was a lot of duplication there, the browser starting logic. So we're using PyTest within the Python framework. We took advantage of a feature there that allowed us to have that in one location for each repository. But that was still a lot too much duplication from our perspective. Every improvement to the browser launch logic we had to put in every one of these repositories. So we developed our own PyTest plugin. That wasn't meant to happen. Oh, this happened earlier. There is something wrong with my laptop. It's just panicked again.
Oh, really?
That's the end. Thank you. Okay, so while this boots up again, I'll try to explain. Oh no, bear with me one moment. I have an inability to type and talk.
Glad to see the demo effect is still functioning.
Sorry?
Glad to see the demo effect is still functioning.
This has never happened to me before.
Oh really?
I'm just gonna unplug that so I can see it here. This is not good. It's the third time this has happened today, so.
It's a Mac with the Retina display.
Yeah, I need a new MacBook. Or an iCloud. So yeah. Let's try again. I'm going to try mirroring this time. Okay, fingers crossed. So yeah, we developed our own custom plugin, and this allowed us to not only keep one repository for the plugin and all of the browser launching logic, allowed us to expand that. We added things like a custom HTML report, which is the screenshot's a little small here, but that's what that is. And it also allowed us to make this available as a Python package that other people could install and use. And it really surprised me that hundreds of people have downloaded this. People have come into our channel on IRC, so most of Mozilla happens on IRC, and ask for support for it, or want to find out more about how it works and how to use it. And so that's really cool. It kind of it's very encouraging that it's being used by the community as well. You'll see a better example in a demo as long as my machine stays alive. So we also use continuous integration. We use Jenkins. This is just a small snapshot of one of the, or a few of the tests. This is the Mozilla Developer Network tests running on several different environments. Also, we run some of our tests on Source Labs, which is Selenium in the cloud, which I'll also show a demonstration of. So when running tests via continuous integration, it's important to us that we only run the tests when there's value in the results, and that means if the application under test has changed, if a new deployment has been made, any code changes have been made, rather than just running as frequently as we possibly can. With the amount of tests that we have, and the amount of products that we have, we need to be able to spread the tests, spread the load. The other thing that we also do is we tend to run every test build at least once a day, even if there are no code changes. That will help us to detect any environmental changes that may occur Otherwise, you may have a build that doesn't run for a week, and then it runs, and you find out that 5 days ago the environment went completely down. And obviously, when that much time has passed, it's difficult to diagnose what the cause was. So, demos. Hopefully this will work. I did pre-record this because live demos never work, right?
Dave.
I need to make that.
Dave.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you catch a lot of bugs?
Yes. Well, it depends. If you're within the, if you're talking within the with the Selenium tests or in general, I mean, a lot of our tests fail from time to time, and we have the same issue with flaky tests. But we do catch tests, and when we do, we're incredibly grateful that we've got the test automation in place. Genuine failures that are failures in the application, that we probably catch 1 or 2 a week. Yeah. Right. I'm going to go ahead and run this because in the video I do increase the font size. Okay, so what's happening here is we're going into the Mozilla.com tests that I've already cloned from GitHub, and we're creating a temporary virtual environment with Python, and then we're installing the requirements. The requirements are defined by each of the test repositories. Fortunately, I've cached all the requirements, so this doesn't take too long. But the requirements are with things like the Selenium Python bindings itself, and PyTest and Mozweb QA, which just flashed past there, is the plugin. Okay, so once we've got the environment, once we've got the tests, we just get back into the tests directory. We run PyTest. -n is the number of processes that it's going to start, so run tests in parallel. It means it'll send, if you're running grid, it'll send 5 to the queue on grid. If you're running locally like we're doing here, it'll just run up to 5 instances. The number of tests we've actually got, I'm just doing a subset. There's only 4, so you see 4 instances of Firefox will fire up and run the tests. All of these tests are just checking various elements are visible and present on the technology page in this example. Unfortunately, they're a little boring. I modified one of the tests so it failed, just because I managed to find 4 tests that were passing, and I wanted to show you what the report would look like with a failure in it. This is the one that's failing, I think, and it may just be waiting to time out after an implicit wait. And you see that the Firefox instances are shutting down at the end of each test. So we run a browser session per test. Okay, so you get the stack trace, the trace back here with the failures. We're asserting false, and it turned out to be true. So this is readable to some, but we have this custom HTML report, makes it a little bit more easier to understand. So at the top here we have the configuration. Sorry, it's grey on white, so it's a little difficult to read. But we have the configuration at the top here. We have a summary of the number of tests that were ran. Here we have the failed test and the traceback again. This time we've got a little bit of highlighting, and we've got the screenshot, and that's the full canvas screenshot that we grab. That's proven to be essential for investigating failures. We also grab the HTML. Not as useful, and the failing URL, which is handy. Sometimes, obviously, if your test is built up quite a complex URL with various parameters, etc., you can jump straight to it. And in some cases, that will actually recreate the failure that you're seeing. So the next test is very similar. It's going to be the same tests that are running, but I'm going to run them in Source Labs. So if you're not familiar with Source Labs, they basically provide, you can just point your Selenium tests to their servers rather than your local server, and they'll fire up a virtual machine for each test launch the browser, run the tests, and tear it down. So the syntax is slightly different here. You're specifying a browser name, optional browser version, and platform. You need to specify Source Labs credentials, and we've included this as part of the plugin. You specify YAML file with this. And the reason we did this is everything we do, because it's open source, generally, we have it stored in a separate repository, so we don't have any hard-coded values. So triggered off the tests, go to the Source Labs jobs page, and you can see the 4 tests are running there. If you click on one of these job names, you can actually see the test running. And Source Labs is great for situations where you want to test on browsers that you don't support in your infrastructure, or if you just want to have a really big push and get all your tests run in parallel and get fast feedback. So these dots are tests that are passing. We should see the same test failure. Very similar traceback to before, probably identical with back. However, the HTML report, we'll see some differences here. We now have a link to the Source Labs jobs. That's for every test that ran. And then for failures, we also embed the video. So we don't currently have support for video with our tests that run on our own infrastructure. So sometimes when we have tests that are failing and we're struggling to understand what's happened, we can run exactly the same test through Source Labs and we can review the video. Because when we're running things through Grid, we don't know which node it's going to be running on. It's very difficult to just watch and see a test run. And then the Source Labs report here has the video at the top, the entire log of all of the commands, and the final screenshot. It also has screenshots for a lot of the commands that cause interaction and the page to change. Okay, I think that's the end of the video. Yep.
So this only works for like live sites that are from source.
No, Source Labs do. So another advantage with Mozilla is all of our sites are public, even our development staging sites. But yeah, it's quite common that you'd have those private. Source Labs do provide a source tunnel that solves that for you. So you can actually have them still testing those sites. You just create a secure tunnel so they can connect directly to them. So that's what we've got at the moment. And there's various things that we want to enhance this with in the future. The first one listed here is the VMware ESX. The idea here is that we're currently running these tests on, I think, 5 or 6 Mac Minis, and 3 or 4 of those have Windows virtual machines on them. They're manually maintained, and they do require a fair amount of maintenance. Also, Selenium server itself sometimes needs to be restarted, and it's a lot of manual work at this point. And we also want to push it out. We want to have more virtual machines. We want to potentially have more Macs, and the more we add to this, the higher the maintenance cost. So VMware ESX should allow us to communicate with VMs that are already running, or clone and create VMs from a known good snapshot, and set them up in such a way that they're ready for testing. And part of the setup process will be making sure that they get the current version of Selenium that we want to run against. Most importantly to us is we want to test on pre-release versions of Firefox. So at the moment, a lot of our tests are running on release version, but we have nightly builds. We have our Aurora channel, which is slightly more stable than nightly. We have beta, which is obviously the next version of Firefox. And so one of the things we want to do with this VMware ESX is script downloading and installation of Firefox, grabbing the latest Chrome driver, grabbing the latest IE driver, setting up the machine, and saying, okay, I can now run tests. and then repeating that process every 24 hours or on whatever schedule we decide, which means we mitigate any issues with long-running servers, any memory leak issues or anything like that have affected us in the past. Moztrap integration. So Moztrap is our test case management solution at Mozilla. And what we want to have is when a test run is completed, we want to be able to look at the Moztrap report and see which one of those test cases have been run through automation and what the result was. Similarly, we want to use this to connect to the Moztrap API and say, how many of our test cases have we automated? Do we have automation for? And that gives us an idea of coverage. The test users, Mozilla's pushing a new identity and login project called Persona, Mozilla Persona, and a lot of our projects are starting to adopt that. What that allows us to do is to create test users via an API. At the moment, some of our tests that need to log in, they're using stored credentials. Several tests are using the same credentials, and this causes issues when, for example, one test wants to modify a username and another test wants to verify it. And if they run in the wrong order, wrong sequence, or they run at the same time, then it could cause issues. Obviously, we can set up those two tests to use two different user accounts, but our vision is that every test that needs to log in will create a throwaway user, use that, and then tear it down. Another issue and a problem, again, with being open, in a sense, is that we want to show everybody our test results. At the moment, we can't, because if a test happens to fail during login, the stack trace could include the credentials. That won't matter so much when using a test user, which is going to be deleted in the next hour. If somebody got hold of those credentials, logged in, and changed a whole load of things, it doesn't matter. That test account will never be used again by our automation. Whereas if they did that with our current test accounts, it could cause failures. The security testing and performance testing are somewhat related in that we want to get Selenium to set up a proxy, or get our infrastructure set up a proxy for Selenium and the browsers that it's launching to use. Using tools like OWASP Zap, Z-Attack proxy, we will be able to gather the URLs that are used by a regression suite. After the regression suite is run, it can then spider to find any more URLs, which gives us some information in terms of coverage, and then it can attack the site, and we can then gather the results. Performance testing, similar in that it'll be using a proxy, but it'll be gathering client-side performance data and allow us to analyze that. Is there time for questions? Yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
We sometimes have a problem that when a new Firefox version is released, that the driver doesn't keep up with the release. How do you copy that?
Yeah, so it's a bit of an issue, and we are working on ways to make this better. One of the things we are hoping to do is make sure that Selenium is a step ahead in terms of its support. So the Selenium tests themselves run in Source Labs, and they run against, I believe, the latest release that Source Labs supports. What we want to see is that they'll be running against beta, or maybe even further ahead than that, and that will give us at least some better leeway to know when there's going to be a breakage, and make sure that so there's a Firefox release every 6 weeks, and so that gives us 6 weeks if there's an issue with beta to fix it in Selenium and get a release out. Typically, the issues that I see with latest Firefox releases is support for native events. And so, for example, I think the current version of Selenium 225, although it supports Firefox 15, it doesn't support it with native events. So you're forced to use Firefox 14 in that instance. This is something that we're trying to solve in different ways. There is the current Firefox driver, as it is in the Selenium project, will ultimately be replaced by a product that is developed by Mozilla ourselves. In its current form, it's called Marionette, and it just means that we'll have that tighter integration, and it means that it's a more if it breaks in Firefox, and there's going to be a lot more people caring a lot more about that. But yeah, it's an issue, and it affects us too.
Chrome has the same issue.
Yeah. I mean, we're Mozilla, and we're running our tests in Firefox 14 at the moment. So yeah, we're aware of it, and we're concerned by it. So we'll, and that's one of also the things that the VMware ESX will allow us to run our tests, even if Selenium's not running their tests in Aurora and Nightly and Beta. We'll be identifying these issues, and we'll be pushing to get them fixed in Selenium project. I'm also a contributor to Selenium project, so I should get more involved in terms of making sure the support's good. But yeah, any other questions? Danny?
If you're using Source Labs, which seems awesome, and you're trying to push Firefox betas and nightlies into Source Labs, why are you building your own grid?
Yeah, good question. So we do use Source Labs, but we have an agreement with them, so that we actually have a free for open source use of Source Labs, and well, basically we don't want to push too much through there. And I'm not sure on our numbers, but they're quite high, and I'm sure they're nowhere near what Selenium's using it. But there's that aspect, but there's also, we don't want to rely entirely on their service. If we can, we'll use our own, and where we can't, we'll use Source Labs. So it's typically for other browser vendors, other than what's on our own grid, other browser versions. And the other thing is that the Source Labs don't have the support for Beta or Nightly. I have a feeling that we'll probably have it before they do. It's not a priority of theirs. It's something that they're keen to do.
Right now you're testing a website against certain browsers to see if your website breaks, but I could imagine that Mozilla could also use like a well-programmed website to see if a new version of Firefox breaks.
Yeah, so there's another aspect, another reason for making sure that Selenium has support for future versions of Firefox, because it can allow us to detect issues with those versions of Firefox. The failure may not be your site, it may be the browser itself. Now, Firefox itself has a multitude of tests. We test from the browser Chrome layout, the content layout side of things. We also test the UI in a framework that was inspired by Selenium. So we have similar kind of tests. But so yeah, absolutely. And we have test days where we get people to come help us run our tests, write some tests for us, and sort of it's a shared thing. They upskill